I just created one of the strongest passwords possible using only Python. And the crazy part, this app can generate unlimited secure passwords in seconds. You can choose the password length, you could include letters, you could include numbers and symbols. And this app also tells you how strong your password is, and you could also copy your password if you press this button. Now in this video I'm going to show you step by step how to build this exact app yourself, even if you're a beginner. I will be explaining everything thoroughly, so watch till the end of the video. First, let's talk about the libraries we're using. Let's start off with Tkinter. So write import Tkinter as tk. Tkinter is what lets us create the window, buttons, text boxes, basically the entire interface. Then we import from Tkinter, import message box. This is used to show pop-up messages like errors or confirmations. Now import random. This allows us to pick random characters for our password. And finally, import string. This gives us ready-made sets of characters like letters, numbers, and symbols. Now let's build the core of our app, the function that actually generates the password. We define a function called generate_password, and the way you do it is def generate underscore password parentheses and a colon. So inside this function, the first thing we do is to get the length from the input box. So we do try and then length equals int entry underscore length dot get parentheses. So we take whatever the user typed and convert it into a number with this integer function. Now this can cause an error if the user types something invalid. So we wrap everything in a try except block. This way, if something goes wrong, we can show an error message instead of crashing the program. Next, we check if length is less than or equal to 0. So to do this, we write if length is less than 0 or equal to 0. And if it is, we show an error message using message box and stop the function. This prevents invalid passwords. Now to do this, we write message box dot show error parentheses quotation marks error and length must be greater than 0. Then return. Now we create an empty string called characters, just like this. This is where we'll store all the possible characters the password can use. Alright, now this part is where we decide what kind of password we want to generate. We start with an empty variable called characters. You can think of this like an empty container or a pool that we're going to fill with possible characters. Now these 3 lines check what the user selected in the app. First, if var underscore letters dot get parentheses. This checks if the include letters checkbox is turned on. If it is, we add all letters to our character pool using string ASCII letters. So let's write characters plus equals string dot ASCII underscore letters. This includes both lowercase and uppercase letters, like lowercase ABC all the way to uppercase ABC. So now our pool contains letters. Next, we do the same with numbers. So if var underscore numbers dot get parentheses, then a colon, plus equals string dot digits, just as so. So now our pool might look something like lowercase letters, uppercase letters, and then numbers. So now we have letters and numbers, and now we need symbols. So let's do the same. If var underscore symbols dot get parentheses colon characters plus equals string dot punctuation. Now this checks if the user wants special characters. If yes, we add symbols like exclamation marks, dollar signs, and more using string punctuation. So now our pool could be a mix of lowercase and uppercase letters, numbers, and also symbols. At this point, we've built a custom set of characters based on what the user selected. So instead of always using the same characters, the password generator becomes flexible. And later, when we generate a password, we'll randomly pick characters from this pool. So the bigger and more diverse the pool is, the stronger and more secure the password becomes. Now just copy what I'm writing here and I'll explain in a second what all of this means. If characters equal sign, quotation marks, colon, message box dot show error, parentheses, quotation marks, error, select at least one option and return, and that's it. Now let's talk about this little but very important check. So what's happening here? Remember earlier we built a character pool based on what the user selected, letters, numbers, and symbols. If the user doesn't check any of the boxes, our pool stays empty. There are no characters to pick from. If we try to generate a password with an empty pool, the program would crash. The check is a safety net. It says if the pool is empty, stop everything and show an error message. We use message box show error to pop up a small window that tells the user select at least one option, and the return statement right after it makes sure the function stops running. Nothing else happens until the user fixes the problem. So basically, this line is all about preventing errors and guiding the user. It's like telling the program, don't even try generating a password if there's nothing to pick from. In short, this keeps our app safe and user-friendly. Now just follow along with me and I'll explain in a second what all of this code means. So password equals join random dot choice characters for underscore in range length result underscore var dot set parentheses password check dot underscore strength password except value error message box dot show error enter a valid number. That's it. Now comes the most important part of our function, the actual password generation. Let's break this down. For underscore in range parentheses length, this is a loop that runs as many times as the length the user entered. The underscore is just a variable name we don't care about. It's a common Python convention for I don't need this value. Basically, we're saying do something length times. This picks a random character from our pool of allowed characters that we built earlier. For example, if the pool is underscore letters, upperscore letters, numbers, and symbols, it might pick uppercase A the first time, 3 the second, and exclamation the third, and so on. Each pick is completely random. This takes all those random characters we picked in the loop and combines them into a single string. The quotation marks before dot join just means we're putting them together without any spaces. So in short, this line is doing everything that makes the password random. Here, we display the password in the text box in our app. Result var is a link to the output entry box, so calling .setPassword updates the UI automatically. This is why when we click generate password, the new password appears immediately, and then check strength password. This calls another function that checks how strong the password is. It looks at the length and updates the strength label with weak, medium, or strong. This is a nice extra feature that makes the app feel professional. This is the safety net for when the user types something that isn't a number. For example, if they typed ABC instead of 12, this will catch the error and show a pop-up message instead of crashing the app. Now let's create the copy function. So to do this, let's define copy underscore to underscore clipboard parentheses. Here we define a function called copy to clipboard. This function will run whenever the user clicks the copy button in our app. A function is just a block of code we can reuse whenever we want. Now let's do root.clipboard_clear. The first line clears the system clipboard. The clipboard is like a temporary storage on your computer for whatever you copy. We clear it first to make sure we're not mixing old content with the new password. Think of the clipboard like a whiteboard. You erase it first before writing something new. Now to be able to copy the password to clipboard, we do root.clipboard_append result_var.get parentheses. This is where we add our password to the clipboard. Result_var.get parentheses gets whatever password is currently in our output box. The clipboard append adds it to the clipboard so the user can paste it anywhere, like a browser, document, or email. Now we also want a confirmation message, and to do that we do message box.showInfo parentheses copied and password copied to clipboard. Here we give the user a pop-up message saying password copied to clipboard. This is just for feedback so they know the action worked. It makes the app feel more professional and interactive. Now to check the strength, we need to define a function called checkStrength. So define check_strength and then parentheses password and a colon. Here we define a function called checkStrength. Its job is to look at the password and tell the user if it's weak, medium, or strong. We pass the password as an argument so the function can analyze it. Now to calculate the password's length, we do length equals length parentheses password. The first thing we do is calculate the length of the password using len. Len just counts how many characters are in the password. For example, if the password is abc123i, the length is 7. Now we also want to check if the password is weak. To do this, we do if length is less than 6, then strength_label dot config parentheses text equals weak, then fg equals red. Now if the password has fewer than 6 characters, we mark it as weak. Strength label config changes the label in the UI. Text weak updates what the label says, and fg red changes the text color to red so it's easy to see. Now to check if the password is medium, we do else if length is less than 10, strength_label dot config text equals medium, fg equals orange. If the password is between 6 and 9 characters, it's medium. We update the label to say medium and use orange to show caution. And for strong password, we do else strength_label dot config parentheses text equals strong, fg equals green. Now if the password has 10 or more characters, we call it strong. The label turns green, which is usually associated with safety. Now you could tweak with the numbers and choose what's medium or what's weak, but I'm gonna keep it as 6 and 10. Now let's create the actual window. Now to create the window, we do root equals tk.tk parentheses, and down here let's write root dot main loop parentheses, and if we run the code, you're gonna see that a window appears but is empty. So here we created the main window of our app. tk.tk initializes the window and gives us a variable root that we can use to control it. Think of this as creating the blank canvas for our application. It's like opening a blank document where we'll add the labels, buttons, and input boxes. As I mentioned, our window is blank and it says TK on the top. Now to change this, we do root.title parentheses quotation marks pass word calculator. Now if we run the code, you can see that the title of the window has changed. Password calculator. But the window is still empty, so let's change that. First, let's change the size of the window. So do root dot geometry, and I'm gonna do 420 x 400. Let's see how our window looks. And this is a good size. Now to explain what I did here, geometry controls the size of the window. The first number is the width and the second is the height. This ensures our window isn't too small or too big. Now let's set a background color, and to do that we do root dot config parentheses bg equals this color code. Now let's see how our window looks, and the color is nice. Now you could choose any other color by like this one. Now let's create a title on our app. To do that we do tk.label parentheses root, and then we do text equals password generator, and this will be our title. And also we made a small mistake here. Label is supposed to be with an uppercase L and not with a lowercase l. Now let's change the title a bit and tweak with the font. So let's do font equals parentheses Arial, and let's make it size 18, and let's make it bold as well. Now let's change the background color of the label. Let's do BG equals and then quotation marks, and I'm gonna do this color. And then we also want to change the foreground color to white, so let's do FG quotation marks white. Then we close the parentheses and then write dot pack parentheses paddy equals 15. Now what pack does is it tells Tkinter to display the widget, and paddy adds vertical spacing, i.e. padding, above and below the label. Now if we run this code, you guys can see that we got the title password generator as we just specified. Now we're going to create the input field where the user can enter the password length. Now just follow along with the code I'm writing, and I will be explaining in a second what all of this means. So let's do tk.label parentheses root text equals password length background this color foreground equals white dot pack parentheses. So the tk label creates a text label, and root places it inside the main window, and this text is what we're gonna display above the input field. BG is the background color, and FG is to set the text color, and dot back displays the label on the screen. Now let's do entry underscore length equals tk dot entry parentheses root, then justify equals center, and the font is again going to be Arial, so parentheses quotation marks Arial, and let's make it size 12. Now let's do entry underscore length dot pack parentheses paddy equals 5. Now this line creates an input box where the user can type the password length. Here we create a text input field inside the main window, and justify center centers the text inside the input box. And of course this is where we set the font and the font size. And the variable entry length stores this input field so we can access the user's input later. Now dot pack displays the input field, and paddy adds a little vertical space around it. Now we're going to set up the options that the user can choose from when generating the password. Now let's create a variable that controls whether letters are included. So let's do var underscore letters equals tk dot boolean var parentheses value equals true. And then let's do the same for numbers. Var underscore numbers equals tk dot boolean var parentheses value equals true. And then let's do the same for symbols. Var underscore symbols equals tk dot boolean var parentheses value equals true. Now what tk boolean var does is that it creates variables. These are special tkinter variables that store either true or false. We set all of them to true by default, which means when the app starts, all options are already selected. These variables will later be connected to checkboxes, so when the user checks or unchecks an option, the value automatically updates. So basically this part is preparing the logic behind the checkboxes, deciding what kind of characters the password will include. Now we're going to create the checkboxes that let the user choose what kind of characters to include in the password. So do tk dot check button, and then the root, we already mentioned what root is, and text equals include letters. And let's not forget the parentheses at the beginning and the end. Then let's do variable equals var underscore letters. So now we connected this check button to the variable we just created here, i.e. the letters. Now let's change the background color. So let's do bg equals quotation marks hashtag 1e1e2f, and let's do foreground equals white, then select color equals quotation marks 2b 3d, and then let's end it with dot pack parentheses. Now let's do the same for numbers. Just copy this. You can press Ctrl C on your keyboard and then just paste it here with Ctrl V. Now let's change the text from include letters to include numbers, and the variable to var underscore numbers. Now let's do the same for symbols. Include symbols, variable var underscore symbols. Alright, now if we run the code, we're gonna get an error. Let's see what the issue is. It says unknown color name 2b3d. So the mistake we did here is that we forgot the hashtag that is necessary for the color code. So do hashtag, and hashtag again. Now let's run the code. As you guys can see, we created the checkboxes for letters, numbers, and symbols. Now let's create the generate password button. And to do this again, we do tk dot button parentheses root and text equals quotation marks generate password, and then we do command equals generate underscore password. Now what we did here is connecting the generate password to what we just coded up here, generate password. Now let's change the background to hashtag 4CA F50, and then let's change the foreground to white, and then let's change the font to Arial, size 12, and then let's do pad X equals 10, pad Y equals 10 minus 5, and then let's end it with dot pack parentheses pad Y equals 15. Now if we run the code, as you guys can see, we got the generate password button. Now we're going to create the area where the generated password will be displayed. So let's do result underscore var equals tk dot string var, and then parentheses. Then let's do entry underscore result equals tk dot entry parentheses root text variable equals result underscore var, and then let's do the width 30, and then let's change the font to Arial just so, size 12. Then we're gonna do justify equals center. Now close the parentheses, and then let's do entry underscore result dot pack parentheses paddy equals 5. Now this creates an input field, but instead of the user typing into it, we use it to display the generated password. And text variable equals result var links the entry box to our variable, so whenever result var changes, the text inside this box updates automatically. Then finally this displays the result box and adds a bit of vertical spacing. Now we're almost done, and now it's time for the copy button. But before that, first let's run the code and see if there's any errors. As you guys can see, we got one error. Now let's troubleshoot this error. As you guys can see, PyCharm tells us that perhaps we forgot a comma, and it also shows on which line this error occurred. So as you guys can see, we forgot a comma here. Now if we run the code, you guys can see that we created the area where the generated password will be displayed. Now let me stop here real quick and mention a very important thing to note in Python. Even if you wrote hundreds and hundreds of code, if you made one small mistake, it could give an error on your whole code. As you guys just saw, a small comma was the reason why our code crashed. So keep that in mind. Python is very sensitive with these types of mistakes, because at the end of the day, it's not a human. It's a machine that you're feeding information to. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's create our copy button. Now this is very simple. What we need to do is tk.button parentheses root, then text equals copy, close the parentheses, and then the command is going to be copy underscore to clipboard. So we connected copy to clipboard to these lines of code we created earlier. And then let's change the background. Let's do hashtag 2196 F3. And then let's do foreground equals white. Close the parentheses and do dot pack. And then we can do paddy equals 5. Now if we run the code, you guys will see that we got the copy button, and when you press it, you get a pop-up telling you that the password was copied to your clipboard. Now we're going to create a text which tells us if our password is weak, medium, or strong. So for this, let's create a variable strength underscore label equals tk.label, and then parentheses root, comma text equals quotation marks, and leave this empty. Then do comma font equals Arial, and let's make it size 12, and then let's make it bold. Now close the parentheses, add a comma, then let's change the background to hashtag 1e1e2f. Now let's close the parentheses. Now let's do strength underscore label dot pack parentheses paddy equals 10, and then close the parentheses. And that's literally it. It took us less than 100 lines of code. Now let's see the final product, and let's run the code. As you guys can see, our very own app, which generates very strong passwords. As you guys can see, we got the password generator text here, the password length text, and then we got the input field to choose the length of our password. So let's say 10. And then we can choose to include letters, numbers, and symbols. I want to include them all. Let's do generate password. As you guys can see, we got a very strong password. And of course, we can also copy this. Password copy to clipboard. Now let's delete this. And just to show you guys that this app is actually functional, let's uncheck numbers and symbols and do generate password. As you guys can see, we only got uppercase and lowercase letters, and we could also do only numbers. Generate password. As you guys can see, we only got numbers. Or for example, we could only include numbers and letters. Let's generate password. As you guys can see, there's no symbols. And then let's copy this. And if we paste this here, we get the password that was just copied to our clipboard. And then we also tweak the code so that it will give us an error if we enter something other than a number inside password length. So let's say we do ABC here, which is not a valid password length, and we press generate password. We're gonna get an error that says enter a valid number. So that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see similar videos in the future. See you guys in the next video.